Having full stretch coveralls would be a big difference because I'm working on animals that are moving around and jumping around, so I need to be able to follow them, whether it's doing preg checking, crawling over gates, coming in and out of chutes.
And be able to move your legs and move your arms and not be restrained while you're just trying to get a job done makes a world of a difference.
Hello and welcome to The Real Well. I'm Bridget. I'm here with Lauren, and we are thrilled to have you with us. So today we're going to talk about feeling attacked. Maybe it's almost like adult bullying, whether it's in farm situations where someone's pushing you about a land deal. Maybe it's even within your own generational farm family, and you're feeling attacked. Let's work out some details there if we can. So you might be joining us while you're hiding zucchini in your neighbor's yard. Maybe you're trimming some trees, cleaning a hog barn, whatever it might be. We had the well-being of rural areas like yours in mind when we were building this episode. We know how ag has its challenges, and we are right alongside you. We cannot wait to connect and inspire one generation and legacy to the next. Lauren, did you ever feel bullied?
Oh my goodness. It's so interesting because as you were giving the intro, I thought, which story am I going to tell? My nickname in high school from some people became Butch because I could not respond as quickly with my lips as I could with my fists, to be honest. And so I got into fights because I was called awful things. I remember one time we were riding in the bus and this guy behind me kept flicking my hair, just flick, 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 and saying things that were very unkind. And my brother, who was seated 2 seats ahead of me, and my brother's a tall guy, and growing up in high school, he was like a tough guy. He was on the football team, and well, I mean, he's still a tough guy, but, so anyway, he was really tired of me telling this kid to stop. I kept saying, no, stop that. Don't do that. Stop that. And so he finally stood up and turned around. But by that point, I had already stood up and was pummeling this kid. I don't know if this is a great way to start off the podcast, but I hope it gets a few laughs. I wonder now what has happened to those people. To Andy Cadeau, I'm really sorry. I know I punched you in English class, but you should never color on a girl's hypercolor shirt. Do you remember those shirts that used to blow on and they'd change color?
Yep.
He used permanent marker on my shirt. And so in English class, Mr. Allen, I think purposely turned his head towards the board while I smoked the captain of the hockey team at the time. He was, when I think about bullying and the sources of it is, in one sense, I want to say, yeah, we've all experienced it. But I also want to say it's incredibly damaging. It is very, very challenging. And yes, it continues into adulthood. In fact, sometimes if you've gone to like the more peewee hockey games around here, I am gobsmacked at the behavior of some adults when it comes to bullying. And so this podcast is a little bit geared towards, hey folks, A, what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? How do we handle this? But B, let's all strive to change our behaviors in that way.
Well, I think that's a huge point. And I'm going to put it in the context of farms because we have a lot of situations out there right now where there are land deals going on, right? Land is being sold, there's retirements, etc. And sometimes you feel the pressure from a neighbor that's almost like a bullying situation over the land. Maybe it's over something else. But you can also feel that pressure within a family operation. No, we're going to do it my way. And here's why. And sometimes you revert back to those childhood roles within your sibling set.
Yeah.
And that can be part of the situation as well. And I think the first step is when you said, how do we protect ourselves? And if you're in a multi-generational farm and there are bullying instances between the siblings or maybe even with a parent, what are the first things we should do to try to I can't say combat it because that seems wrong, but we should try to make the situation better.
Unfortunately, it is probably the number one situation that I have that comes to me as a therapist, right? People seeking to come to me for support therapy. They might be experiencing anxiety, they might be experiencing depression, but when we go a little bit behind that veil, there's conflict. There's on the farm conflict, often with family members, or like you said, neighboring farmers can be a real source of, I don't want to say frustration.
But I would say concern because, there are lots of instances where something wasn't going well with the neighbor. And you did feel as though you were being pressured into a situation or poked at, bullied, literally.
When we first bought the farm, my dad was helping us, and we didn't know our neighbors. We didn't really know the community very well, but my dad had his contacts who were a little further away. They're a good 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes away. So he would line up and he would say, "Oh, so-and-so, can you come and, bale hay or do that sort of thing?" What I didn't realize is I had inadvertently actually kind of offended some of my neighbors because they offered those services. And so so in fairness, sometimes we don't realize that what we're doing. We don't realize how we are causing that kind of offense or that type of thing. I was really appreciative. My neighbor actually came and spoke to my husband, said, as neighbors, let's support one another kind of. And we were like, oh, absolutely. We just didn't know. We really didn't know. So the other piece that you mentioned, though, is when it's happening like on the farm within families. And
right.
I want to be clear. It's unlikely that we're going to solve any of these mass issues because typically these issues brew for many years.
Oh, deep-seated, even generational.
Very generational. We have a huge generational impact that comes up with these, client relationships. And we have historic even from childhood, where you've got, the first sibling who was type A personality, and the third sibling who was, the computer geek. And somehow they're all on the farm and they're trying to, the computer geek thinks we need to, and sorry if you're a computer geek, because I think that's fabulous. I wish I was more computer geekish. But, like if you've got that kind of personality on the farm and they're looking to, maybe they want to do a different way of inventory or a different sales mechanism with forward contracting. And, you've got all of that kind of technology. And then you've got somebody else who is, so obviously we've got conflict. The first thing I would encourage people to do is figure out, is this conflict, or is this where a boundary needs to be set in? You see,
those are two very important differences right there.
They are huge differences. Because conflict means we have a shared goal. Conflict means we are both wanting to get to this position, but we can't figure out how to get there the same way. But we have a shared goal. Whereas boundary setting, we don't have a shared goal.
Mm-hmm.
Boundary setting means I need to protect myself and my family. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in agreement with what I need. Boundary setting is absolutely critical in our farming relationships because they convey to other people our sense of autonomy and our own, goals and things like that. And we can set those in a way that is freeing. We can set those in a way with our siblings that allows for people to set their own and to kind of come to an agreement, for sure. But boundary setting does not mean that we have a shared goal. Mm-hmm. Now, most often on the farm, we actually have personality conflicts, or we have conflicts around how to do something. But most often it's actually conflict not related to boundaries. Most often. Now there's lots of you here saying, "Oh, I agree with you." There are lots of times where we need to say, you know what, at 5 o'clock, between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, I'm shutting off my phone and I'm not taking any phone calls because I'm going to spend time with my family. That is a boundary. That's okay. But for the most part, when we see the conflict on the farm, it has a lot more to do with how do we come into a form of agreement to get to the goal that we have, which is to build a farm that can sustain generations to come.
And when we think about these things, I think far too often, it's also the fact that, especially within a farm family, we feel like no one should ever no one should ever talk badly. So by creating a boundary, someone else may feel like, well, you're just creating this hurdle for us to get along. That's not it. That just means that someone doesn't understand the definition of what the other needs.
That's right.
I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And it's interesting because we're not very good at communicating that we have a different need. I think we haven't always done a really good job on the farm by giving enough space for people to be able to say that. You know, in our farm families, we are very rich in tradition, and we're rich in our legacies that of the generations that have gone before. And so sometimes we misinterpret what that means for us on our farm, that if grandpa did it this way, then therefore we have to do it this way. And if you could talk to grandpa today, he probably wouldn't actually advise that. Grandpa would probably say, no, like you've got to be innovative. And this is the way that worked for me. Like I remember recording my grandfather before he passed away. And that was one of the things that shocked me the most. He would tell the stories of the old days. My dad too, shortly before he passed away, he would tell stories of the old days and what they did and how amazing that was. But they wouldn't recommend that we go back and do the same thing.
They were happy to point out things could be done differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's allow that flexibility on the farm. You know, when we feel like we're under attack, it's very important that we say, okay, wait a minute. I'm not going to have this conversation with you. You're belittling me, or, you know, we need to stick to the facts. We need to say, this is what's happening. I can't have this conversation, but when we can have this conversation and work towards this goal, I'm happy to do so. But right. And so it's very important that we say, okay, whoa, I know that your goal is to get to B. You know, we both want to get to B. I can't actually get there if we're going to make fun of one another, especially with some of those passive aggressive remarks. You're shaking your head, Bridget, and those kind of are littered in our family interactions.
They are, and we've been doing them to each other for generations. And that sort of leads to my next question: how do we change ourselves so we're not the bully or the problem within those discussions? Because that passive aggressiveness, it has to start with us stopping that behavior and with us not being the bully in the situation. What's our first step to doing that?
Our first step is to take a deep breath and say, what type of person do I really want to be? Right? Like our first step is to say, you know, I am like this. Why am I like that? Because people who make those passive aggressive comments or who are, you know, subtly putting people down, I hear it a lot with sarcasm. We have a world where we use sarcasm as a way of safely hurting other people. Mm-hmm. Here's a novel idea. Cut sarcasm out of your life. Like, do we need to use sarcasm? Like when we're talking about bullying other people, like, do we need to do that? You know, ask yourself, what type of person do I want to be? I often encourage people when you wake up in the morning, you know, go through these different steps. And one of those steps is, who do I want to be today? Do I want to be a person who mentors somebody else and encourages someone else because this world is hard enough and I don't need to? Or do I want to be a person that cuts somebody else down, inadvertently damaging relationships?
And I think in reality, we hear that. We hear the negativity and think, oh, I don't want to be that person that cuts somebody else down. Mm-hmm. But yet society lets us encourage it through our sarcasm. It's, oh, but you're so sarcastically funny. But you're right. That's allowing you to be mean in a kind way. Mean in a kind way.
How do we come to that place? But we are. And so and it's interesting. I've heard all sorts of families, you know, use sarcasm or putting one another down. And the way that it's treated is like, oh, well, get over it. You got to build some tough blocks. And I want to say, yeah, we do need to build up a bit of a skin that will let some things slide off. We don't do that by putting people down. That's not how that's accomplished. And so we do that by mentoring one another, by helping people understand their value. That's how you build somebody who will let things slide off, because they already are confident in who they are and their sense of belonging. So On the farm, we can change who we are. The very first step is to take a minute and be like, why am I this way? And why do I treat that person this way? Inevitably, unfortunately, in a lot of farm families, we have one person who's a scapegoat. And so when we've got families who have had 3 or 4 kids, inevitably there's one person who is the family scapegoat. And that person, they probably feel like no matter how hard they try, they just never quite meet those expectations. I challenge people to say, why is that? Why do we have a person in our family who becomes that? And some of you would say, well, they deserve it, or they will. Well, let's understand. Let's look at that from a different perspective. And part of that means you have to be willing to do the hard work. You have to be willing to ask questions.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that completely. That's a whole next discussion, is that family scapegoat, because I think that opened up a lot of eyes as we were listening and talking just now.
All right. So, Bridget, we're at the stage already. I don't know how time flies that fast, but we have a quote. And so that quote is, we have got to dispel this myth that bullying is just a normal rite of passage. And it is written by, it's Barack Obama.
I wasn't expecting that. But I will say this. It doesn't have to be a rite of passage. And it doesn't have to be whether it happens on the schoolyard, on the church council, or within your own family farm operation. It doesn't have to be. And the only way we're going to stop it is for someone to recognize it and say no.
Oh, so interesting. I love that you said on church council, because I think sometimes, unfortunately, a number of us have gotten wounded in those places that we're supposed to feel the safest, whether in our own family, in a church community, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be a rite of passage. I hear people say it is a rite of passage, that, that's just normal. Why is that? Why is it that bullying is normal, that we've gotten to a place where we're okay with it? Because we don't have to be. And what good comes of it? If it's considered a rite of passage, what's the good that comes from bullying? I think
I don't know yet. I don't know the thicker skin. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case.
No, people don't get a thicker skin. In fact, what they get is even more stoic, even more unlikely to open up about their own trials and difficulties. So it doesn't even grow for those people who say, it helps me grow thicker skin. It doesn't actually do that.
Yeah, it does not.
And so it's not a rite of passage. It is something that we need to identify, call out, and change in ourselves, and encourage other people to change as well.
And I think we can do that. I think we can be better as adults.
Yeah.
Now, one way we can be better is to always go out with a smile on our faces. So this requires a little bit of background information from you. It is in reference to income tax. And for those who are listening and might not know, is there an income tax in Canada like there is in the United States?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the income tax is very high, probably almost 50% of your income.
Okay. So then this is fitting for us that we both are in countries that have an income tax. So at least we're talking about the same thing.
Are there countries out there that don't have an income tax?
I think there are.
I need to move. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm really thankful in some respects. But income tax is, it's so interesting, because I remember watching Little House on the Prairie one time, and Charles Ingalls, and for those of our listeners who don't know, Bridget and I both loved Little House on the Prairie, and he was like, and there was some sort of state tax, and they were all meeting to be like, they were taxing their corn or whatever. And somebody says, and one of these days they're going to turn around, just tax the money we make, give us an income tax. And I was like, so
here we are.
I thought it was hilarious. Yeah. Okay. So yes, we have a very stiff income tax. Absolutely.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to ask. Suppose that income tax had to be paid, but instead of going to the government, your tax dollars could go to any cause or charity of your choice.
That is a great question.
Okay.
Wow.
So assuming the money would have to go to the same place every year, where do you want it to go?
Okay, what a great question. Oh my God. And I wish that was the case, honestly, in so many ways, because of mismanagement that happens in our home countries. The first one I would probably say is Convoy of Hope. Convoy of Hope provides relief, natural disaster relief to countries all around the world. But one of the things they do is they get hands-on. So women learn skills to build a business. And what we know is when women build a business globally, their whole community benefits because they teach other women, they employ other women. That money goes right back and buys the team uniforms and that sort of thing. So again, not to diminish men, but that's not what we typically see when a man runs a business. We don't typically see that same influx in community. Not to say there isn't very generous men who are fantastic.
They're great philanthropists.
Yeah, great philanthropists, but that's what we see. The other group would be Compassion. So there's an organization called Compassion Canada. And so similar to World Vision where you sponsor children. So that would be my other one for sure.
If I get to, the hard part is choosing a charity. I'm not sure that this question allows me to give multiples. It's going to be hard not to. Near and dear to me is the National FFA organization because of what it does to bring agriculture to students, whether it's in ag science focused high schools in Chicago to small rural schools in the Dakotas and Minnesota. It gives you the opportunity to learn how to be organized, a good communicator, and travel. Whether it's just going to your state convention, but getting outside of your bubble and learning about other people and other types of agriculture. And that's a huge one for me. The other one would probably be farm rescue, because when farmers are injured or sick, they, just as we've always said, it's very hard for them to ask for help. But farm rescue is an organization that not only shows up to help plant your crop, hay your alfalfa, or combine your crop. They will do that after you fill out your application and paperwork, and they'll do it with volunteers. They still use your inputs, right? Your seed, your fertilizer, but they're using donations of equipment and people's times in order to make sure that you still stay viable as an operation. And so those are two that I spend the time with. Yeah.
Wow. I had never heard about farm rescue before.
Yes.
Wow,
so
that's amazing. And now I'm feeling like I totally missed the boat by the two ones that I picked because I'm like, oh, what about 4-H? They do such great things. And of course, Three Oaks Cabin in our area who provides. So
you know what?
We would have to split it. We would have to.
But it can't be just us. This is where we need our listeners to say what are the charities and the organizations that they would be a part of.
Yeah.
Because the good news is that spreads those imaginary dollars around that we're sending out to all of these folks. But I hope we also spend our real dollars there.
I'm with you. Fantastic. Thanks for that question.
It's been a wonderful day of talking. Thanks, Lauren.
My pleasure. See you next time, folks.